Welcome to the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, the show dedicated to bring you the news from the oil patch deep in the heart of Texas, with your host, Ryan Ray and Josh Shelton.
Welcome to the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. Ryan Ray here in the captain's chair because, well, folks, you know Josh Shelton. He's been here, 3-4 weeks in a row, so he has to take off. He's like a government employee or something, you know. He needs every third federal holiday or something like that's a day off for him. So Josh is out today, but have no fear. I'm here, the Cal Ripken, the Brett Favre, you might say, of podcasting, the Iron Man himself. Alongside, we're going to bring him out from behind the curtains, against my better judgment, Nate.hansen. Nate, how's it going, sir?
It's going well, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I can't complain. Last week was a good week, and I went down to NAPE, as everyone knows. I'm a man of the people, so I was down at Summer NAPE, and first off, thanks to the folks at NAPE for giving me a press pass, but Nate, I have an idea. I have a way to fix Summer NAPE. So, first off, they rightfully call it Summer NAPE, and that is because it is like the hottest part of the summer. And it's in Houston, which makes it like a swamp. Like it's like 2-3 days of just being in a sauna nonstop. So they got the summer part right. But I just think if they slid it back to September, you know, maybe mid to late September, they could fix the heat issue. And now you might be thinking, well, it's called Summer NAPE. People be confused, but just change it to September NAPE. Just September NAPE, slide it back 30 days, and, you know, your boy wouldn't be like having to change shirts every 30 seconds when he's down there. I mean, I think it's an easy solution to fix the Summer NAPE heat problem. What do you think, Nate?
I think that sounds like a great idea. Another idea possibly would be to move it out of Houston, as absurd as that sounds, because then you're not behaving as if you're in somebody's mouth all the time, no matter what time of year you're down there. That's just me though, with my North Texas prejudices.
Yeah. I think they might have a ride if you move it out of there. But so I think a compromise. Call it September NAPE and just move it to September, and then everyone will know that September NAPE's in September. Like it's not even. You don't have to say Summer NAPE is now in September. You just call it September NAPE. With that being said, had a great time down there. Saw a lot of good people. A lot of listeners I ran into, and I was looking this morning through my cards because I wanted to mention the people that I ran into, and I don't have those particular cards. So I am trying to go back through my notes and see who it was that I ran into, because I told them I'd give them a shout out. And I will say this, I ran into the folks at Texoga, and I sent Neil an email. So Neil, get my email, respond back, tell me who it was I was talking to at your organization so I can give them a shout out. I hate giving Neil a shout out, but he's getting one, unfortunately. But yeah, it was good. Summer NAPE was good. Had a good time down there. And I think I don't really have any events coming up until, I don't know, maybe October. But that aside, Nate, we've got quite a controversy brewing here. We've had, thanks to the listeners, a 20%, at least a 20%, just in overall month-on-month downloads increase. So 20% increase on month-on-month downloads. We've had reviews have been pouring in, ratings have been pouring in, and yet we've fallen 3 spots in the iTunes ranking, which leads me to believe it's got to be a conspiracy, A, or B, Nate, you're not doing your job. I'm fine with either one. Which one are you going with?
I figured C, all of the above, Ryan. However, one thing that I have learned from my dealings with Apple is that they do not care how much love people send you on iTunes unless they are subscribing. And I have a suspicion that we have a low rate of new subscriptions coming in. So our listeners can really, really help us by going and subscribing to the podcast on iTunes or on the Apple Podcasts app.
So rate, review, subscribe.
However, it is also more than likely that I am not doing my job and should probably be locked back in my cage.
I just want to say, if we drop next week based upon your recommendation, then we will fully know whose fault it is.
Yep, pretty much.
Yeah, okay. So,
you're going to blame me anyway, so why not?
Now we have proof of how bad your ideas are, so everyone gets to see it. Rate, review, subscribe. A handful of reviews have come in. The first one, Nate, has an interesting name here. I'm going to read it as if it's multiple words, but keep in mind this is one word as it appears on iTunes.
Okay, this shouldn't be so crappy again?
No. It's a 5-star review. I'm going to read this as 1, 2, 3, 4 words. Ball, sacks, in, tea, bags. Keep it PG for the folks out there. You can put that together. Love it. Don't stop at the cheesy Bo and Luke Duke intro. Hello, keep it up, guys. Thank you, Mr. Bags, we will call you. Next is Come By. Fantastic content for oil and gas professionals. If you're in the industry, want to stay abreast of the latest and greatest, and are looking for to enter the industry, this is the podcast for you. Keep up the good work, Ryan and Josh, your friends at Titan Rock. Love the folks over at Titan Rock. Try to go by and see them at least once a month, if not more. Austin Pressey, best in the world. This one nails it. I mean, best in the world. How else can you describe it, right?
That's just speaking the truth right there.
I mean, I don't see iTunes should have put us at 1 based upon this. This is the best podcast to listen to, hands down, bar none. The guys keep you up to date on all the happenings in the industry and trends they are seeing. Awesome lineup of guests, knowledgeable, funny, and informative. Great job. Keep it rolling, guys. Thank you, Austin Pressey. This is from Chris with a long number, 183. Is this maybe his cell phone number? I don't know.
1839302. No, that doesn't look like a cell phone number.
Okay. So, Chris, thank you for that long number there. Great listen, 5 stars. I really enjoy listening to the show and getting the information and opinions of the industry. As a worker in the oil and gas industry, I like to stay in the know. This podcast helps me do just that. Thanks for your hard work and dedication. Hashtag Mount Rushmore. My man, that is what I'm talking about. We are working on that. This is from...
And Chris, if you want to give us your credit card number, you don't have to do that in your username. You can just send that to me directly.
Yeah, you can send it or cash or check, either one. This is from Love's Free Picks. Okay. Frackin' in the Bonkin. 5-star review. Great podcast. Good humor and good perspective. So we started at the great podcast. The humor is good and the perspective is good. But you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. We'll take it. Good perspective on the industry. Keep striving for that $1 billion podcast buyout. Exactly. If you know anyone who wants to buy out this show, let us know. Rate, review, subscribe according to Nate, but rate and review mainly. And subscribe and don't tell a friend. What else, Nate? What else could they do? There's a lot of things they could do.
Share our content on LinkedIn. Share our content on Facebook. We have
take your email list and just blast it out to there.
Yes.
So
we are on the friends.
Yes, we are on the Mount Rushmore quest. If you don't know, you're new to the show. We were ranked number 20 in the business news category. We're trying to get to top 4 status. Obviously, Josh Shelton not showing up for work doesn't help us at all with that. But I'm here carrying the load once again.
So it might just have to be you and me and our 2 biggest subscribers on that Mount Rushmore there.
Hey, that's a good question. Can Josh keep his spot on Mount Rushmore if he doesn't show up for work?
I would suggest no. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be Theodore Roosevelt to make it onto Mount Rushmore. Or somebody who doesn't quit.
Yeah, I mean that cat got shot and kept on going, right?
Yeah.
Josh sees someone with the sniffles and he calls in sick. So, anyways, okay. Well, hopefully
that
Josh
French work ethic of his.
He makes the French look like hardcore workers. So, but anyways, all right. So, who we have onto the show today, Nate?
We have on 2 guests today. The first is Ben Heinzelmann with MineralWare. He is the vice president over there. He is coming on to talk to us in just a few minutes here. And then after Ben, we have on Mr. David Blackmon, who I believe our listeners is very familiar with.
Yep, David Blackmon's coming on once again. A lot to get into with him, and so we're excited about that. And so, know the news. We have oilandgascruise.com. Just a few weeks to sign up for that. Again, you're not paying anything, but if you are interested in potentially going on a cruise with the crew and some other folks, then you need to get that done by next week? And 2 weeks. I guess 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. And so, without further ado, we'll get to our guest. Up next, we have on Ben Heinzelmann, who is the Vice President of Sales for MineralWare. Ben, how's it going, sir?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we talk a lot on the show. I say a lot. We talk regularly on the show about acquisitions, minerals, things like that, but we don't really talk about it from maybe the management side of things. And I think this is kind of an interesting topic that we have landowners that listen to the show and might be interested. So why don't you kind of walk through just quickly what it is you guys do, and then why you do it, and what's kind of going on in that space of minerals and lost minerals, if you will, and you can't find them, and you're trying to manage what all is going on with your assets.
Sure. So I work for MineralWare. We're a cloud-based mineral management solution. We built a platform that kind of merges all the different sources of information that a mineral owner or that a royalty owner would access into one location. So kind of your hard copy folders, typically most of those folks are using hard copy folders or Excel sheets, getting a lot of check stubs in the mail. We merge all those into one location. Again, most folks are kind of doing it the old fashioned way. We're trying to kind of bring that up to speed in a new digital era, trying to kind of put it all into one solution.
So are you guys, when you're looking for tracking minerals and stuff, what is it that you're seeing from the landowner perspective? Is it, company A is purchased by company B, and then when they kind of take over their drilling program, that maybe it gets lost in the shuffle there? Is it just, just for whatever reason, there's database changes on the company side? Why is it that this is such a hard problem to track and people get lost in the shuffle?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Well, number one, I think the biggest issue is a lot of people just don't even know what they own. That's kind of problem number one. People kind of usually just go off of what they're paid and make sure that, the second operator that takes over operations just pays them on those interests. But a lot of times you have these ancillary assets that, mineral and royalty owners aren't really aware of that they even own. So that's usually kind of step number one, that we make sure that each mineral owner needs to make sure they know exactly what they own. And this applies to not just your standard mineral and royalty owner, Jim Bob that owns some interest out in West Texas, but also, acquisition groups. A lot of times these acquisition groups, they acquire interest and they'll have a list of properties listed on the, on the exhibit. But a lot of times they include catch-all language. Just typically it's a blanket conveyance that is, selling everything that owner one owns into them. And they don't even know. A lot of times they just get division orders and a bunch of random stuff. They didn't even know what they owned. And so even if they do get in pay status, there's a lot of, number one, you don't know that you're paid accurately. But number two, the industry is so dynamic. There are new wells being drilled. It seems like, every other day. So even if you have a pretty solid handle it on one day, if those operations or that leasehold has changed to a new operator, they're, like you said, and you brought up a good point, things just kind of inherently slip through the cracks, especially when two land systems or land teams start talking to each other. That's usually where we see the biggest issue. And a lot of times there's a million different reasons why some of those things might slip through the cracks beyond just a kind of a, like you said, systems talking to each other. There could be title issues, whether, the operating company just runs poor title. There's a lot of different things that come up. We've actually seen it a few times where we had a large client out in the Permian. They're just a large nonprofit. And when we loaded them into MineralWare the first month, we located, I think it was like $125,000 in suspense on 3 wells that they didn't even know about. And I think it was something as simple as just a bad zip code on a division order. There are things as small and simple as that end up putting funds in suspense for a lot of our clients. And, again, a majority of folks just don't have the resources to chase those things down. And even if they do, if they're using kind of the antiquated methods of chasing these things down, it's very manual and time consuming.
So from the landowner side of things, maybe what are some misconceptions when they're going through it and they're saying, I kind of think I have all this wrapped up, or I kind of have a handle on this. When you're talking and consulting with landowners, what are maybe two or three things that you see that you go, you know what, hey, you might need to look for this, or you kind of thought you had all these things in this bucket, but guess what, you didn't have this information. Things that they're just genuinely overlooking when they're trying to put together what minerals they own and where.
A lot of times you see that these mineral owners aren't including we see it whenever most of these owners are transferring interest into a new entity. We have several clients that have 16 plus entities, believe it or not. And so that's difficult enough to make sure that everything is in pay correctly, even if you owned all those assets in one county. But most of these clients, they own assets all over the country. So you start to talk about, assets in 10 plus states and 16 entities or so, that gets extremely difficult, to make sure that everything is in pay status. So a lot of the issues that we see are, not including all the correct legal descriptions, not filing, all the necessary conveyances in each county. Again, you're in 10 plus states, you're in, 100 counties or so. I mean, you literally have to file a conveyance at every single county. Another thing that they're not, a lot of mineral owners aren't even including a list of all the legal descriptions. They're just using catch-all language. And so when an inexperienced landman is out in the field and they're running title, it's very easy to miss, especially if they're just going up to the abstract office and they're looking for all the conveyances on a particular track, especially here in Texas. They're very liable to miss some sort of conveyance like that that is intended to catch everything at once. That's typically the biggest issue. It's normally just a paperwork thing, and it's something that we run into on a daily basis. Not just on from a standpoint of, or from a client owning assets in 10 plus states, like I mentioned. It can also be just the standard owner that owns in 3 to 4 counties. We actually ran into this with my grandmother. My grandmother owns a bunch of interests kind of spread out in Oklahoma. And it was a deal where, her grandmother passed away in El Paso, and we probated the will here in Texas, but didn't file it in the state of Oklahoma. And all the operators in the state of Oklahoma require it to go through the actual probate proceedings in Oklahoma. So there were a bunch of wells and revenue held in suspense there in Oklahoma. And quite frankly, unless they had contacted us, we would have had no way to know about it. And since then, I've loaded her up in MineralWare, so hopefully we can fall through the cracks.
Well, that kind of brings me to my final thing, which is one of the things that we talked about is, and the landmen that our listeners might not be happy with me, but we need to get it out there for the people, is that some landmen are going through and they're finding this, and hey, I'm a capitalist, man, go make your money however you want to, but they are finding these people who aren't getting the checks, and they will contact the landowner on their behalf and then solve the problem, and they could be taking 30, 40, 50% of the stake. And so, hey, again, if you want to do that, go do it. I don't have a problem. If you're a landowner, though, and you go, you know what, how do I prevent giving up 50% of my stake? You guys are a viable solution that can help protect the landowner on their side as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Number one, the way that we do that is, we use a cloud-based solution that is mapping out all the client's interests, and it's overlaying live well and permanent data and production data. And then we take kind of the final step of integrating all the check stub information and tying it to the map. So the client actually knows exactly what they're in pay on or what they're not. And again, it's updated on a daily basis. So, when you get into the situation where you're a standard mineral owner and you're using, the Railroad Commission website, check stub information, you're trying to use an Excel sheet or a hard copy folder to manage it, you kind of end up jumping through a bunch of different hoops. You're comparing, you might be looking at your check stubs, comparing it to the Railroad Commission and going back and forth, and that gets out of date the very next day. So with us, we're integrating it into one solution where the client, especially when they're in multiple counties, they can see exactly what they're in pay on and what they're not. And more importantly, like I said, if there is something producing per the state or in any state in the country that is producing that they're not in pay on, the system actually automatically spits that out. So obviously it's never going to be perfect. State data is never perfect. Client data is never perfect. There are always things that are missing, but it's killing a lot of the initial work up front instead of having to go through and kind of manually put together a spreadsheet of everything that you think is missing. It's killing all the hours of work on the front end. But yeah, we see that a lot, where there's a lot of landmen here. And quite frankly, I mean, that's my background as well. Not doing that specifically, but I would never disparage that sort of work. I think there's a lot to be said about locating something for someone and going through the process of actually getting it into pay status. That does require a lot of work, so they deserve to be paid. But we actually had my dad had some interest that my grandfather passed along to him, that I think I mentioned this to you at lunch the other day, that some guy had located out in Upton County. And it's the thing, typically in the tax rolls, you're listed as an owner, but there's no address. That's really what these folks are usually doing. They're just locating some very productive areas, trying to locating the owners that are on the tax rolls for that particular lease where they don't have an address, and they'll try to locate those people. And then, like you said, kind of give them hopefully get a kickback from the mineral owner. But we had a situation like that with my dad, and there were, I think XTO had drilled like 12 wells across that particular section. And my granddad, I think, had sold it back in 1999 for like $100,000 or something, and running the reserves, it's worth like $6 million today, which is a little frustrating. But it's one of those things where for most mineral owners, they don't know how to locate any of that stuff. They don't have the resources to do that, so they are reliant on a landman to do that. And again, they're giving up 30, 40, 50%, whereas they can use our product and for a few $100 a month, they can kind of do it themselves.
Okay, well, that is, hey, that's a double-edged sword there. So if you're a landman, you're looking for a new way to make money, there's your opportunity. If you're a mineral owner and you're looking to save money, contact the folks at MineralWare. They will help you out. MineralWare.com. Nate will link to that in the show notes. Ben, is there anywhere else, folks? I know you guys are downtown Fort Worth, obviously, but is there anywhere else, website, besides the website, LinkedIn, social media, you want to send folks to today?
Yeah, check us out on LinkedIn. We typically post a lot of our updates there. Also our website. Those are typically our two favorite avenues to post material.
Awesome. Okay, great. And MineralWare.com, again, is the website. Be sure, if you are wanting to get your acreage, your minerals managed by these folks, be sure to check out MineralWare.com. We'll link to all that in the show notes. Ben, it was great having lunch with you the other day. Thank you for coming on the show. Good stuff you guys got going on there.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate the time.
Up next, we have on, once again, David Blackmon, who is the editor of Shale Mac and Forbes contributor. David, slight bone to pick with you here. When does the title say Texas Oil and Gas Podcast Contributor? That's what we need to get added to this.
We can do that too, yeah.
How's it going, sir?
Oh, going great. It's a beautiful day in Texas.
Okay, we have teased this for a few weeks now without you knowing it probably. We have talked about having you on because, as you know, there is a lot of news, if you missed it, out in the Permian Basin. Well, and David, right now there's a lot of fear, I think, out there in the market. And so, we have one listener, Speakner, who is pretty outspoken, saying that he thinks that the smaller companies and the mid to smalls are in serious financial trouble. Thinks the big boys will survive, but the smaller ones are in trouble. I know that you obviously are covering this type of stuff on a weekly basis, and you put a couple pieces on Forbes. So we wanted to say, hey, let's bring in David, get his perspective on what is going out there in the Permian. Is the small cap, mid cap Armageddon around the corner? Is it overhyped? Can these companies make a profit? I'll let you take it wherever you want to take it from. So we'll just leave with that.
We had Armageddon for those companies in, 2016, when we had more than 200 of them go bankrupt. We've had a slight uptick in bankruptcies so far this year over last year, but, there weren't hardly any last year. The fact of the matter is, where small and mid caps are concerned, some of them are always in financial difficulty because some of them aren't particularly well managed. I don't want to be harsh, but the better managed companies are not in financial difficulty, and the poorly managed companies, with taking on too much debt, more debt than they can sustain, and have high operating costs, and don't drill the wells as well as other companies do. Yeah, they're going to be in financial troubles. I had a very interesting conversation with Alan Gilmer a couple of weeks ago. Alan is the chairman of the board at what?
It's not Drilling Info. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's not Drilling Info.
It's now Enverus. And he reminded me of something I've always known, but you tend to forget sometimes. is that shale formations are different than conventional formations. In a conventional formation like the East Texas field, it didn't really matter who drilled that first well in the East Texas field. It was going to be a gusher because the pressure had built up, and then everybody who drilled wells around it also had gushers because it was a conventional formation. It was just this big pool of oil down there in the ground, sitting in a very porous formation. But in these shale formations, the skill with which you do your drilling and do your frac jobs and perform your completions and perform your workovers really matters. It matters a lot. You can have, right now in the Permian, you could have one operator next door to another operator drilling in essentially the same rock. And because one operator is a really good operator and knows what they're doing when they're drilling their wells and targeting the rock, is going to get 30% better results than the guy next door. So skill really matters in shale formations in ways that didn't so much matter when you were drilling conventional wells. So yes, some companies are in trouble. Some companies are always in trouble. And, that just is something that it changes by degree in the industry, but there are always a number of companies who are having financial difficulties.
So if I'm following what you're saying, essentially is that the companies, if you take out conventional, talking about the shale plays, the companies that are in trouble in the shale plays could be not necessarily that there's anything fundamentally wrong with producing it's not that you can't make money producing oil from shale. It's that you had to have a different set of skills or more elite skills or however you want to phrase that. And if you don't have those and you go for the big cash grab, you're going to fail. Whereas if you're for conventional, it's a little bit easier to get in there and make money. And so what we're seeing here is the shale companies are out there kind of going for the gold rush, if you will, may not have the skills, so they're going to fail. But that's not indicative of whether or not companies can make money in the shale plays, if that makes sense.
Sure. Some companies are making money hand over fist out there in the Permian Basin. I mean, my God, ExxonMobil announced this morning, that they're going to actually increase their capital budget deployment for the Permian Basin in the coming months. So, Exxon's a big integrated company, but there's independent producers who are also increasing their capital budgets towards the Permian Basin and targeting the Permian Basin over other basins in the country. So, these folks who are, there's always a set of critics who are predicting out there the end of the world for the oil and gas industry. The peak oil people have been doing it for over a century now. They're never right, and they're not right this time.
So I guess let me take it like that. So it sounds like that there could be some commonalities in what you're saying and what some of the listeners are saying, but maybe coming from a different vantage point, which is there could be companies in trouble. You're just arguing potentially that the trouble is a lack of talent or skill, or whatever you say, and they're saying the issue is it's not profitable, which then leads me to my second point.
Not profitable. See, that's a general blanket statement that is simply not true and is demonstrably not true by the facts on the ground.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So they're saying it's not profitable, and you're saying, well, okay, they're not profitable, but why? And the reason is they're not skilled, they don't have the talent, or what expertise, or whatever you want to say. That would be the difference. Which means if you do have those resources, you could make profit out there. So if these small to mid cap companies do start going belly up, the larger companies would be incentivized to then go pick them up. Correct?
Yeah, depending on
their assets. I mean.
Sure. It would obviously, it always depends on the quality of the resource that they have under lease, but sure. And we're going to see a lot of that. We've already seen Oxy eat up Anadarko Petroleum, in the biggest merger since, BP Amoco, or was it Chevron Texaco was the last big one in the late 90s. And, we're going to see a lot of consolidation out there. I think that, people need to understand a lot of these bigger independent producers and even the mid-sized independent producers, they're just resource plays. They're just, their management teams actually created them in recent years in order to sell them eventually, to acquire some primo resources and develop them to some extent and set the company up to where it's a a very beautiful takeover target to be acquired by an ExxonMobil or a Chevron or somebody like that. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of that. I think there's going to be a ton of it in just the next 12 to 15 months.
So, and I know, David, you know this, but just for the listener standpoint, and as you say, sometimes it's good to remind yourself. We talk about oil and gas. We always talk about, it seems like, the upstream. How does the midstream tie into this? If you are, because obviously you have takeaway capacity requirements and stuff for midstream companies. How are they going to fit into this? We talked last year about we didn't have enough capacity. Now the articles are starting to come out where we're going to have spare capacity either on the market now or, depending on who you believe, by the end of the year or first quarter. So the spare capacity is there. If you do see some small to mid caps that are going to struggle, is that any concern for folks maybe on the midstream side of things?
Well, it could cause some diminution in their subscriptions to their pipeline companies. The midstream, and as you mentioned, we are beginning to get to the completion phase of a lot of these major pipeline projects coming out of the Permian. We just in the last 2 weeks have added over 1 million barrels a day of takeaway capacity from two different pipeline systems going live. But yeah, you could, if a company goes belly up, of course, that's even exaggerated, right? These companies don't just stop producing when they declare a bankruptcy. They go into Chapter 11, it's reorganization. The wells keep producing. But yeah, I mean, theoretically anyway, you could see some disruptions in oil or gas flow in a pipeline. I think what's going to be interesting to watch, over the next few years is in the midstream section, if there is any further consolidation in that sector of the oil and gas industry, as all these major projects are completed in the Permian. But, some companies have had their very critical projects held up in the eastern part of the country and in the Intermountain West by environmental protesters and through lawsuits in the federal courts. And it would be interesting to see. I'm just beginning to and I haven't done a lot of research on it, but I'm just beginning to kind of think about, what are we going to see in the midstream now that some of these big projects are actually being completed? Are we going to see any similar kind of consolidation in that sector of the business?
Yeah, no, that is something of interest that I've wondered, because the models are a little bit different there. And, I know some midstream guys who, they would call it junk pipeline, if you will. They'll get these old systems and just kind of put a little WD-40 on them and scrub them with a wire brush, and they just kind of keep them going, and then every now and then they'll add some new capacity or whatnot. So it is interesting to kind of see where that will shake out. Next thing is the ducks. Now I've said it for a while now, kind of a duck agnostic. I don't really know how many they're out there, and I don't really know what the impact of them will be, because no one has told us what they're going to be, and because we're not OPEC, we don't really, it's just kind of each company's going to do their own thing, right? So the duck thing is kind of interesting to kind of watch, but it feels like it gets too much attention. Now, we had on the folks from Cryos about a month ago, and they said that they believe that the ducks are actually far less than what the EIA is reporting. And I think I heard someone else the other day who kind of echoed their sentiment. And the reason was, just real quick, this is what I heard, so I don't quote me on this. Not for Cryos, but the other person. But essentially, that the EIA is going from frac focus, and they're kind of, and sometimes I think it's frac focus. Frac focus, anyways. Frac focus data sometimes is a little bit lagging, like by years, and so sometimes you could sit there, and be way behind on what's going on. So it's not exactly the best way to measure it. Anyways, ducks. Just get your opinion. Where are you on the ducks? Are you thinking that there's a lot out there that could come on, like a lot of people have speculated, not as many, or do you have an opinion at all?
Well, there's still a lot of them out there. Companies last year in particular, over the previous 2 years, drilled an awful lot of wells and didn't necessarily bring them onto a sales line, didn't want to complete them, just waiting for better prices. And there's still some amount of inventory out there. I agree with you. I don't think anybody really knows, frankly, the real number. And I suspect it's overstated, because I think what we saw in the early part of this summer, as the drilling rig count was dropping fairly dramatically, and U.S. production continued to go up every week, essentially, except for the week the hurricane came through the Gulf of Mexico. Is a lot of companies not drilling wells, but allocating capital dollars to completing wells. Because during that period of time, if you remember from late May through about mid-July, the oil price was actually going up, fairly well. And I think we had a bunch of DUCs get completed at that time because the frac spreads were increasing while the rig count was going down. And so it's kind of hard to keep up with all that data. And I haven't kept up with the number of frac spreads this month just because I've been focused on other things. But we did for about 2 months have a consistently rising number of frac spreads with a consistently falling rig count. And that tells me there's a lot of DUCs being completed.
Well, David, we expect you to have all the data ready and available when we have you on. Come on now.
This is kind of a shot in the dark, but
I know it. I know it. You mentioned rig count. I think we'll probably start to wrap it up with this. So first off, if we go back historically on the rig count, as you mentioned, we talked about before, the rig count isn't always the best indicator of what's going on, especially like a week-on-week basis. It's it's kind of okay, this is what it is. Month-on-month is something. Quarter-on-quarter, you're kind of getting somewhere. Year-on-year, you're getting somewhere. But you have to couple that with the production output because the rigs are more efficient than they used to be. So it's not the same. With that being said, the rig count, there's a lot of pressure to take rigs off the market. We'll see where that ultimately ends up by the end of the year. I know some of my folks who were in the upstream side selling OCTG products have kind of said, "Hey, man, there's a lot of product on the ground, not a lot of drilling going on." And I was talking to someone the other day. I said, it feels like theoretically maybe the second half of this year is going to be rough for more rigs at least coming on the market, and potentially the first half of next year, depending on what the price does. But maybe by mid-year next year, we might see some rigs coming back on, maybe some excitement back in the market. Obviously, anytime you're predicting anything like this, it's just kind of a shot in the dark. But it feels like that might be barring some crazy circumstance, the earliest we could see a lot of optimism and a push for a lot of rigs. So do you agree, disagree? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think you can become optimistic in October. So what happens with these companies, particularly the corporate companies, is they go through their budgeting processes beginning either in late September, early October to start working up their capital budgets for the following year. So if you remember last year, the price began crashing on October 2nd. We reached a high on the price and the oil price began to crash and spent 2 months crashing at exactly the same time all these companies were building their capital budgets. So the rig count peaked towards the end of the year as they were continuing to execute the rest of the remaining 2018 budget. But then in late December, the rig count really began to fall very rapidly and did for about a month. And since then, it's just steadily fallen ever since. And we've idled more than 200 rigs now since mid-December. And I think we're probably going to idle another 100 rigs between now and the end of the year because all these companies lower their capital budgets for the second half of the year. But if you see fairly strong crude prices in October, then you can become optimistic that the drop in the rig count is going to stop on January 1st, and it's probably going to start going back up a little bit. How much is just going to depend on whether the price increase holds and continues to rise. But it's all dependent on what the expectation for the price in the coming months is. And I see no reason to expect. I'll be honest with you, I don't think the price is going to change much at all between now and the end of the year. I think we're kind of range bound between 52 and 58 or so. And we're going to be that way for the foreseeable future until there's some major change in either, U.S. production growth or the OPEC plus deal or something major happens to change the current dynamic.
It's funny. We said on this show, I think it was last year or maybe 2 years ago, that we wish the price would just stay stable somewhere, just for a length of time. And the price is stable, and everyone's kind of losing their mind. It's like, it's like when the price was going from 100 down to 20, folks would have begged for 50, or when it was So now we have some stability. If it does kind of flush out some of the companies who aren't able to stay competitive. And I don't want people losing the jobs, as you know, but that's part of the market process, and that will happen. But if it can stay between 52 and 58 for a couple of years, I'm not exactly mad at that either. What I don't want is it to drop to 40 or 30 and then up to 70, and then we're back to where we were 2 years ago.
Yeah, and having a little added predictability also enables companies to get better at what they do, and that's what we've seen since the price crashed in 2014. Is these companies are incredibly more efficient and effective at drilling these wells and keeping their costs down, and that's just going to continue over time. So some of these companies that aren't necessarily profitable today, if we do have a fairly stable price environment, a year from now might be profitable just by doing what they do better than they currently do it.
Okay, David. Well, it was great to get you back on the show. Shale Mag, Forbes, Nate will link to that stuff in the show notes. Anything else before we get you out of here today?
No, just come to Shale Mag. We're going to have Ryan Zinke on the cover for our September-October issue, and we're currently trying to figure out who our cover subject is going to be for November-December. But a lot of good stuff going on there, and come read my stuff at Forbes. I like to have readers. All
right, well, David, it's good to have you on again. Thank you, and maybe Nate will reach out to you and get you booked again before the end of the year if we can. It's hard to get work out of Nate, so we're hoping we can get something out of him before the end of the year.
Wow, Ryan.
All right, guys.
I need more tire marks on my face.
Thanks, David. We appreciate it, brother.
All right, y'all take care.
All right, have a good day. All right, Nate, you sent me a note during the Blackmon interview. You said we had a retraction to issue. I don't like issuing retractions, but we'll blame you for this. So what did we get wrong?
Yes. So during that interview, I noticed that you were kind of searching for the name of the company that we spoke to with Ted Hall. The name of that company is Kairos.
Kairos, crayons. Cairo, whatever. Link to him in the show notes. We'll give him a free thing. Speaking of retractions, last week we covered a breaking story about Sergio Chapa, who, in my opinion, misled his Instagram followers by saying that he had dinner at Culture on my recommendation and omitted that I was there. I don't know if this is a retraction or not, but Sergio did edit the Instagram post to include that I was there, which is fine, but I didn't see anything on the Houston Chronicle website about this, so it just goes to show you those big timers, they think they can not public. We just admitted that we were wrong. We just took responsibility. We took ownership. We put it out there for the world to know. Sergio just edited a post and, said, hey, I hope you, take that, you filthy animal, or something like that was his text. So that's the difference between us, down home, country folk, and the big business folks like Sergio who, mainstream media, man, they got all the power, Nate. It's tough to compete with that.
He pretty much just takes our stories and makes them into his headline pieces anyway.
That's exactly what he does.
Actually, I got confirmation of that over the weekend too. He admitted that he was stealing stories from us, practically, sort of.
Well, we don't report the news. We just make it here at the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. Listeners, thank you for tuning in again. Rate, review, and Nate says subscribe to the show. Let's get that Mount Rushmore status, oilandgascruise.com if you're interested in that. David Blackmon would be one of our speakers if we go forward with that. Him and Joe Dancy and myself, Josh Ellenwald, and one other to be named. Nate, anything else before we get out of here?
That is all, Ryan. Other than reminding our subscribers or our listeners to become subscribers again and to sign up for our oil and gas cruise at oilandgascruise.com.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, keep climbing.